Center for Faculty Excellence. It's my pleasure to be here today with Dick and Martha Larkin. They're going to share with you some information about achieving excellence in data visualization. You can use these ideas for your scholarship and service work here at Walden University. This is the second presentation of this particular webinar, and I think it's really interesting. So I think you're going to have a lot to learn from Dick and Martha. Just a couple things before we get started. There's a few pods here on your screen today. First of all, you see the main pod, which will be the presentation, and you'll be able to see Dick and Martha's PowerPoint. I will send a copy of this PowerPoint as well as a link to the recording after the session today, so you can access that or share that with your colleagues anytime you like. We have a chat box for sharing information and participating. That's at the lower right-hand side of your screen. So if you have a question, have something to share, or want to provide some insight or input, some ideas that you have, please feel free to use that chat, and let's make this a really interactive session. Again, we are recording this session just to let you all know that, so that we can, again, share this with our colleagues and have it available for other folks to participate in at a later date. Oh, Paul, I see you're here in listen-only mode. That's great. You use the chat to share if you have questions or things you want to share. We wanted to start out by finding out where y'all from, so if you wouldn't mind typing into the chat box and letting us know where you're physically located today. And if anybody is experiencing some of this bad weather we're having, we had some yesterday and a little bit nicer today. Tennessee, thanks, Tom. Richard, Missouri. Okay, great. It's great to have everyone here today. So with that, I am going to turn it over to, I think, Martha, you're going to get started first, right?
Yes. Thank you, Lori.
You betcha.
I'd like to also welcome everyone. I'm Martha Larkin, as Lori indicated, and I'm with the Richard W. Riley College of Education and Leadership, and my co-presenter.
I'm Dick Larkin, and I am the program director for the PhD program in Public Policy and Administration in the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. And although our audience is small today, I can tell it's high quality, so we're going to try to give you a presentation of just the same quality as the quality of our audience. Being good academics, one of the first questions we have to answer is the why question. Why would we be interested in data visualization? And I think there are two very important reasons to be interested in data visualization. One is with the increased amount of information and data that we're able to acquire through the internet and other sources, and the ability to store and analyze that data with modern computing power, it's becoming more and more important to be able to present our results to our audience in a meaningful and interesting way. And so we think that visualization is one way of presenting results in a way that the user can understand the information the analyst is trying to communicate. And another reason is that studies show us that about 75% of what we know comes from visualization. So I think it's important to us to be able to provide our audience with good data visualization.
Okay, next slide, please. And so we have two learning outcomes for this session, and we've already applied some visualization to help you see these outcomes. One of them is to evaluate the quality of visual presentations of data. So hopefully after this session, you'll be able to do that. And then our next outcome, please. Next slide. And the second one is that you will be able to demonstrate how to apply principles of visual excellence to data presentation. So in this time, we're only going to be able to scratch the surface, but hopefully you will learn more about data visualization. We'll give you some resources, and hopefully you'll become as excited about it as we are and be able to apply data visualization to your scholarship and service as well to the classroom. Next slide, please. So if we define data visualization, we can look at the example of the pie chart on this particular slide. Instead of just presenting data in the table that you see to the left, we can at least make it a little more interesting and a little more colorful with the pie chart. And so for centuries, people have depended upon visual representation of data, either in pictorial or graphical formats, and using such things as charts and maps to help them understand the information more easily and quickly. But now, as we have more technology and tools that we can devote to data, we're collecting more and more data and analyzing more. We need to be able to make sense of it. And so decision makers at all levels welcome data visualization that helps them to be able to see the results quickly, presented visually, find relevance among millions of variables that they might encounter, and to be able to communicate concepts and hypotheses to others, and possibly even predict the future. Next slide, please. So I'm in the field of education, and I went out on the web and found this particular one-page graphic that is an example of data visualization that we might find. This shows, you don't have to be able to read all the specifics on this, but you can see from a glance that this particular one is showing the global teacher shortage. You can gain statistics at a glance about the teacher shortage. You can see some of the contributing factors or consequences there, you know, overcrowded classrooms, children out of school, and so on. So there's a lot you can learn just from this one graphic if you were particularly interested in wanting to learn more about global teacher shortage. Next slide, please.
And just to demonstrate the applicability of data visualization across a wide range of fields and disciplines, I'm in the field of public affairs. And so obviously one of the things that people who study public affairs are interested in are elections. And the map I'm showing on the screen right now is a map showing the states that President Obama won in the 2012 election in blue, and the states that Governor Romney won in the 2000 election in red. And if we would look at that map and compare the amount of blue and the amount of red on that map, we might conclude that Governor Romney was elected President of the United States in 2012. But if we can move to our next slide, please. We can see that if we show the states rather in proportion to their geographic size, but in proportion to the electoral vote size, that we have much more blue on the map now than we do red. In fact, President Obama got 332 electoral votes and Governor Romney got 206. So the way we present our data in visual form has a great deal to do with the way our audience will receive that data and understand the meaning of the information we're trying to communicate to them. So if we could move on to the next slide, I think Martha's going to give you a little introduction to someone who has become a renowned leader in the field of data visualization.
So you may or may not have heard of Edward Tufte, but as Dick said, he has become a renowned leader in the field of data visualization. He is an American statistician and professor emeritus of political science, statistics, and computer science at Yale University. He's known particularly for his writings on information design and a pioneer in the field of data visualization. So much of what we'll be talking with you about today is based on Tufte's work. You can see his picture on the slide, also 3 of his books. He has other books, other information. So you may want to visit his website, and we'll provide you with that information later on. Next slide, please.
So I'm going to begin our presentation by talking about Tufte's first principle. And I have 2 graphs up here that represent a proper display of this principle and a not so good display of this principle. But the principle is that the representation of numbers as physically measured on the surface of a graph should be directly proportional to the numeric qualities represented. And quantities represented. And I have 2 graphs up here. One of them on the left is a fairly famous graph that many of you might have seen this summer It was presented in a congressional hearing on funding for Planned Parenthood. Now, I'm not trying to make a statement about the benefits of Planned Parenthood or the pros and cons of abortion and pro-life and that sort of thing, but I'm trying to show you what a bad graph or a graph that violated this first principle of Tufte's might look like. If you look at the graph on the left, you would think that at the present time in 2013 that the Planned Parenthood was performing more abortions than they were cancer screening and prevention services. That's because the graph is not displaying the quality of the quantity of the numbers in the physical space of the graph. For example, in 2006, the Planned Parenthood was performing about 290,000 abortions, whereas by 2013, they were providing about 327,000. Now, the number of health screenings they were providing went from 2 million down to about 900,000. That's still 600,000 more health screenings than abortion, but the graph would not lead you to think that. If you look at the graph on the right, where the numbers are presented in the proper proportions on the geographic space, you can see that the number of abortions has remained fairly constant, while the number of health screenings has decreased, but it's still far more health screenings than abortions. So I think these two graphs, like I said, I'm not trying to make a political statement. I'm simply trying to make a data visualization statement of how data should properly be presented to an audience. I think Martha has a little quiz for you here on the next slide.
Okay, so we've been talking enough, so we need to get your input now. If you were ill and needed some sort of product, and you went into the store and you saw a product like this, would you buy it? So if you'll look on your screen, there's a little person with the hand raised up at the top. And if this is something that you would buy, please click on that person with the hand raised, and that would indicate that you would answer yes to this. If not, then you don't need to click on that person. But either way, whether you would answer yes or no, please indicate why you would buy this or would not buy this in the chat box. So we'll give you just a moment to let us know your input. See, a couple more people are typing, so we'll wait on their responses. Waiting on one more person here. Okay. I see someone else is typing, so we'll give everybody a chance. So you all have hit the nail on the head. Obviously, as John says, it's not identifiable. Tom said big unknown. Bobby said I would not buy it because it's not labeled. Richard said insufficient information. If we were giving away a prize, we would give you a virtual prize because, yes, you did get this correctly. So if we could go on to the next slide, please. So obviously here we have the same product, only this time it is labeled. So obviously if you were looking for a product of this type and you were interested in this particular brand and product, you probably would be more likely to buy this because it was labeled. You could identify what it is, you could read the information on the label and find out more about it if you were not familiar with it. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So that leads us into Tufte's next principle of graphical integrity, his second one. And this one is clear, detailed, and thorough labeling should be used so that you don't have graphical distortion and ambiguity. You should go to the point of writing out explanations of data on the graph itself, label important events in the data. So you can see on the left pretty much a non-example of Tufte's second principle, and on the right one that would be a better illustration of this principle. So if we look at the one on the left, all we can determine from this is it's some sort of grade distribution. The grade ranges go anywhere from an A to an F. We can see those representative slices of the pie chart, but we really don't have any numbers or anything to go with it. It really doesn't tell us very much that would be meaningful. if we look at the pie chart on the right, we can see that it has a lot more labeling, which can be very helpful to us. We can see that we know which course this was for, the grade distribution, that it occurred in fall 2015. We know numerically exactly what an A stands for, 90 to 100, B 80 to 89, and so on. We can see not only the representative slice of pie, but also what percentage it is of the whole. So we can gain a lot more meaningful information just by the labeling, which is something that's simple enough and easy enough to do. All right, next slide, please. Here we look at Tufte's Principle 3, and this one, before I tell you what it is, let's have you to do a little bit of observing. So compare the chart on or the graph on the left with the one on the right, and see if you notice anything different. If you do, if you would please indicate your response in the chat box. Okay, great. We see that John has responded, dates are rearranged. Tom has responded, dates are presented in more finer time periods or segments. So, yes, if you look at the horizontal axis on the chart on the left, you'll see that it's in increments of about 4 to 5 years. But when you get on that same chart, as you go to the time period, more current time period, and you get into 2012, 2013, 2014, those increments are different. We have increments of maybe a year to 2 years there, and so that would not be accurate. But if you look at the one on the right, you can see that on the horizontal axis, the time periods are consistent. They are in the same increments. So that illustrates Tufte's Principle 3, which is show data variation, not design variation.
Next slide, please. Tufte's Principle 4 deals with showing monetary values in a time series. And Tufte advocates that it is almost always better to use dollars that have been standardized for deflation rather than current dollars. And I have two graphs here. I have the price of a loaf of bread in current dollars and the price of a loaf of bread in 1970 constant dollars, spanning the time period from 1930 to 2010. Now, I would imagine that most of the folks on the line can remember back to their childhood something that they could say, well, back when I was a child, I could buy this for so much, and now it costs me 3 times that much or 4 times that much. And the example that comes to mind immediately for me is a gallon of gas. I'm old enough to remember when a gallon of gas sold for 35 cents a gallon. Now it's $2.35 a gallon. But that doesn't tell the whole story, because 35 cents when I was a child would purchase a great deal more, but I made a great deal less at that time. And so if we look at the two charts there, the chart on the left showing the cost of a loaf of bread in current dollars, it's gone up almost 2,667%. But if we look at it in constant dollars, 1970 constant dollars, it's only increased about 110%, or basically just doubled over that period of time. Now, you're saying, okay, this is great, Dick, but how do I understand, how do I convert current dollars to constant dollars? And my advice to you is to go to Google or some other web searching site and type in Bureau of Labor Statistics Inflation Calculator. And you will be directed to the Bureau of Labor Statistics page, and they have a very simple calculator you use there. For example, if you want to find out how much 50 cents in 1930 dollars is worth in 1970 dollars, you just put in 1930, 50 cents equals, and then you pull down 1970, and it would tell you exactly how many dollars or how many cents you would need in 1970 to have the same purchasing power you had in 1930. So if we could go to the next slide.
Okay, we move on to Tufte's Principle 5. And this one is the number of information carrying or variable dimensions depicted should not exceed the number of dimensions in the data. So, for example, if these graphs were representing teacher shortage, and you look at the one on the left with the picture of the teacher in 1995, and one in 2005, and one in 2015, you can see that based on the vertical axis, they have increase in teacher shortage. But you can also see the representation of the pictures not only have increased vertically, but also have increased horizontally. And having a picture to increase horizontally on the chart on the left really has no meaning because there is not an identified dimension there that it would correspond with. So actually the bar graph on the right is a better representation of Tufte's Principle 5 because it would show the same teacher shortage, but you notice that the bars are the same width. They are not, that dimension is not varying. That we're only showing the increase in teacher shortage based on the what you see on the vertical axis. So we have to be careful when we're using the pictures, not in how we make them bigger, make sure that they are representative of the dimensions on representing the data. Next slide, please. Okay, Tufte's Principle 6, if we is graphics must not quote data out of context. So if we look at ACT average composite scores from 1995 through 2015, on the left, we see the state of Mississippi represented. So the line looks fairly flat, starting to increase a little bit from around 2010 up through 2015. But that really doesn't tell us a whole lot. What we need is some context to find out how Mississippi is doing in comparison with other states. So we've included some other states on the graph to the right. So you can see, for example, Connecticut is represented by the dark blue line, was fairly flat from 1995 to 2000, but then started increasing substantially after that point. If we look at Hawaii, represented by the red line, fairly flat until 2010, and then it started decreasing and ended up in 2015 about the same place as Mississippi. You can also see Georgia and Alabama represented there in their particular pattern. So by including the state of Mississippi scores with the other states on the graph at the right, that provides some context with how Mississippi is doing in relation to the other states, rather than just isolating it by itself. So if we could go to the next slide, and Dick is going to provide us with an overview of tools that we can use for data visualization.
We've given you a really quick and dirty overview of some of Tufte's work, and we don't mean to just overwhelm you. There are some other areas that you can use to help you find about additional information with regard to data visualization. And so I'm going to discuss several of those that you have available to you right there on your own computer. So if I could go to the next slide, please. One of the sources that I think everyone that works at Walden has is Excel. Excel is a very limited way to display data visually, but it does have its some features that are handy to us. One of the things about Excel is most of us know it, we know how to use it, but there are some additional features we can use with Excel that would take a graph which is somewhat limited, like the one on the left, and make it into a much better graph. But Excel, unfortunately, provides you with many tools, but they show you how to use the tools, but they don't really give you a great deal of information about how to actually visualize the data. So if I could move to the next slide, please. A better source of information for data visualization is SAS. SAS is a statistical package very similar to the statistical package that we use at Walden, SPSS. And SPSS has some data visualization tools. However, the SAS website, which is open to everyone and free, has a great deal of information on how to present data in a visual format in high quality visualization. So I would advise you to just go to their website and look at some of the information they have on data visualization. Next slide, please. Another statistical package is Stata, and Stata is a very powerful statistical package. Once again, it has data visualization tools. But what I like about Stata is, once again, their website not only presents information about their product, it also presents information about data visualization in general and how to display high-quality graphics and other types of visuals. Next slide, please. Coursera has several courses, MOOCs, and there are some other ones. I know Duke University has them, but they have some short courses on data visualization. And they're fairly inexpensive. They only cost about $40 a course, $50 a course, and they're run in the MOOC format. And that's another excellent way of gaining some information about data visualization and also sharing with other folks who share common interests with you. Next slide, please. Something that I'm really excited about, and I think you're going to hear more and more of this at Walden, is Walden is now a user of a data visualization product known as Tableau. And Tableau is being integrated into the business intelligence side of things. I noticed the other day in a meeting we're also starting to use Tableau to present data with regard to retention and faculty performance. And Tableau is just an outstanding product for data visualization. But Tableau is also an outstanding provider of free information on how to visualize data. And so if you go to their website, you may have to sign in and so forth, but you will be able to download a series of white papers and so forth demonstrating proper procedures for the visualization of data. Next slide, please. Walden also offers resources on the MyLearn website that's available to Walden faculty and staff on how to use Tableau. There are several training modules, and there are also free books that you can read about the uses of Tableau for data visualization. Next slide, please.
Before I go to the next slide, Dick, Tom has a question in the chat. He's saying, why have a 3D axis?
Oh, sorry we missed that question. Tom, which slide were you referring to?
The Graphical Integrity 5.
Oh, that was the, Lori, could you go back to that slide, please?
It was one with the 3 bars containing a woman. Yep, we can go back to that one. Let's see.
Okay.
This one here?
Yes, I think that's probably a good question, Tom. There is no real reason for that. It probably would be better if we made that flat rather than the 3D. So appreciate your pointing that out to us.
Were we here?
No. Keep moving forward, please. There, that's where we were. Thanks.
Okay, great.
Okay, go back one, please. There we go. Another form of data visualization that I am very excited about and have been using for a number of years, but is becoming more and more popular, is the idea of geographic information systems. And GIS by ESRI, ESRI, is the leading provider of geographic information systems. And if you visit their website, which I think is simply esri.com, they have a number of articles and information and so forth about how to use geographic information systems to present numbers and information in a geographic format. Now, I've got an actual GIS map that I used a couple of years ago with one of my colleagues when we were looking at the influence of Hispanic population growth in the Southeast on potential redistricting of congressional districts. And if you looked at the 2010 census, the idea was that there had been tremendous growth in Hispanic population in a number of counties throughout the South, some of them increasing their Hispanic populations by 300% and 400%. And so we wanted to just see how this might actually impact the redrawing of congressional districts in the future if we were trying to provide some sort of representation for minority populations. And we mapped this out, and as you can see, although some districts, some counties increased a great deal in percentage of Hispanic population growth, the percentage of Hispanics in the entire county population was still very, very minor, with the exception of some places over in South Florida and some counties in Texas. Most southern counties still had very small percentages of Hispanic populations, and therefore, if you were going to draw congressional districts to be representative of certain underrepresented populations, you really still didn't have much to work with. And so we were able to refute what was a fairly common concept in political science at that time, that this was going to have a great deal of impact on elections in the Southeast. But we were also able to drill down and find out that at the state level or the local level, it may actually have some impact, but at the national level, it was going to be very minimum in terms of drawing congressional districts. I'm going to put in a little plug now. Walden has a proposal as we speak right now before the U.S. Department of Education to start offering a certificate program in the use of GIS. And we will become the first public policy program in the country to do that. We've been working with ESRA, and hopefully we will have that certificate program up and running soon. Even better, we may have a specialization for our PhD students up and running by as early as the fall semester, and hopefully the certificate program by the beginning of the winter term. But ESRA is an excellent source of information for additional resources with regard to geographic information systems. Next slide, please. Okay, the final slide I've listed is William Jacoby's homepage at the Michigan State University. William Jacoby is a professor at Michigan State. He is also the executive director of the ICPSR Summer Program, the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research at the University of Michigan. And Walden University is a member of that consortium, and we have access to many of their resources through Walden. Bill Jacoby is his specialty within that field of research is graphical statistics and so forth. And his homepage has a tremendous amount of information about how to perform and actually use graphic statistics. He is an outstanding lecturer, very good teacher, and just all-around nice guy. I had the opportunity several years ago to take some of his classes at an ICPSR summer program, and he's really an enjoyable fellow to work with and a very knowledgeable and good instructor. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I know we've given you a lot of information fairly quickly, but we wanted to be able to provide an opportunity for you to put this information to use. Before we get into the collaborative activities, I'd like to see if anyone has any questions or comments. If so, please type them in the chat box. Okay, I don't see anyone typing at the moment. So, all right, on the first activity, as you can see here, it says a newspaper runs the following headline: family income increases faster than housing costs. So we have two graphs below that illustrate the claim that was made in the newspaper headlines. Both of the graphs display the same information, But we would like you to answer which one of the graphs best represents Tufte's principle 1, that the representation of numbers as physically measured on the surface of the graph should be directly proportional to the numerical quantities represented. So please provide your answer in the chat box, and if you would, if you have any explanation for your answer, we would appreciate that too. I see several people are still typing, so we'll give you an opportunity to finish your thought.
Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to just make a couple of comments. I see you actually figured it out perfectly well. Graph B is inconsistent. It doesn't respect the geographic space on the graph. Also, someone mentioned that we should use percentage of income or something of that nature, which is a method of standardizing dollars, which is another technique we brought out. Someone said it was more detailed. It's labeled better. So, yeah, Graph A overall is just a much better graph for any number of reasons. And we tried to make these simple. So I think we might have underestimated the brilliance of our audience when it comes to graphic representation. But absolutely, everyone is perfectly correct.
All right, if we could move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so here we have the same newspaper using the following graph to show housing costs as a percentage of family income. So what's wrong with this graph? Please type your response in the chat box. Okay, we see responses are starting to come in. We'll give just a moment for a couple more responses.
Well, once again, you've hit it on the head. The graph's not labeled. There are all kinds of problems. It's just too simple. It doesn't. If one looked at this graph, they would have no idea what they were seeing if they looked at it out of context with a newspaper article and so forth. So it just doesn't have enough content and labeling to it to satisfy Tufte's principle. So if we could move on to the next graph, please. This one shows housing costs in current dollars. And I think some of you have already covered this in the previous slides, but we've talked about when you show the value of money over time, the need to express those dollar values in constant or inflation-adjusted dollars. So in the interest of time, we won't have you type these in, but I'm assuming based on your previous responses that most of you would have probably picked right up on this and realized that these are just in constant or current dollars rather than constant dollars.
Okay. So here we have our newspaper article back again, and so it says it adds insult to injury. What's wrong with this particular graph? So please type your responses in the chat box. Okay, so I see we have several responses in, and once again, you have gotten the correct answer. That if we're looking at a housing shortage or whatever represented by the houses, they should not be changing in width. By doing so, it does interject some bias, and we're only measuring something going on here in dollars, which is one dimension, and we should not be changing the symbols or the pictures there in another dimension. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is an activity that, Lori, I believe you're going to post a link to. Is that correct?
Yep, I'm doing that right now.
Okay, so what we would like for you to do, you all have been such excellent students, but we have to give some homework here. So this is a follow-up activity, and we would love for you to be able to access this on the link that Lori has posted, and then send us your responses via email. But what we'd like for you to do is to design a visual representation of the following data. We're not looking for artistic perfection. Instead, we want you to concentrate on the visual representation of the data that incorporates one or more of Tufte's principles. So then once you have done that, then you can email your work to us for further discussion. So does anyone have any questions or comments on that? Looks like someone's typing here. Someone says homework. Oh, no. Well, yeah, but it shouldn't take you that long. And you all are such great students. You have caught on to this very quickly. It wouldn't take you very long at all. Okay, next slide, please. So we'd like to conclude by thanking you for coming to the webinar today. As you can hopefully tell, Dick and I are very excited about data visualization and sharing what we're learning about it with you. We've only scratched the surface, but hopefully you've learned something about data visualization and also some more knowledge and information about resources that you can use. Please keep in touch with us to email us your homework if you have any questions, or if you would like to talk with us further about data visualization, because we certainly would like to keep in touch with colleagues who are interested in this topic. Dick, do you have any concluding comments there?
No, I'd just like to thank everyone for attending. And Marty, I know that you have access to Tableau, so we're really expecting something spectacular from you with regard to the homework assignment. And I know everyone else will do well, too. So we do appreciate you coming. We appreciate your interest in this topic and hope you will send us some information with the graph, because we'd like to keep in touch with you and hopefully establish a community of Walden with regard to people who are interested in bringing data visualization to research, service, and also to our students at Walden. So thanks again for your attendance today.
Thank you, Dick, and thank you, Martha, and thank you to everyone who chose to spend a little bit of your time today talking about this interesting topic. Again, this is the second time I heard it, and I learned something new this time, so great presentation. As I indicated, I'll be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the recording for today, a link to the PowerPoint presentation, and also a link to the follow-up activity if you'd like to do that and further your conversations with our presenters. So with that, I'd like to wish you all a great rest of your day, and thanks again for joining us.